What is normal cholesterol? I want to discuss that as well as what your doctor is probably not telling you. So here you are, you just got your cholesterol test back, and maybe they even handed you a pamphlet that mentioned the word statin, and here you are trying to figure out what is normal cholesterol anyway. The number that defines normal right now is not the same number that defined it normal 20 years ago, or even 40 years ago, or even 60 years ago. That number has been changing repeatedly, and every single time it moves, millions more people are suddenly diagnosed with high cholesterol. Because when you treat cholesterol without investigating the cause, you are just turning off the fire alarm. You might be suppressing the beeping sound, but what about the fire? What caused this LDL cholesterol to increase in the first place? That's really not investigated too deeply. Let me just take you back to 1963. The New England Journal of Medicine published its official table on normal cholesterol levels. And the range back in 63 was between 150 and 280. Okay, so you didn't want to go over that number right there. And then in 1988, the National Cholesterol Education Program released its official guidelines. Anything over 240 was not normal. And of course, at this point, millions of people were put on medication. Something very interesting that happened in 1987. There's a drug called lovastatin. Okay, it's the first statin drug. It was approved by the FDA a year before they changed the guidelines. It's an interesting coincidence. Then we have 1993. The threshold dropped again. Now 200 was the target for everyone. Now in 2001, something interesting happened. They kind of dropped the cholesterol thing and went after LDL. And they wanted you under 130, but under 100 if you're at risk. And then in 2004, they wanted your LDL under 70. And right now, they want your LDL under 55. And they also mentioned in the guidelines having this conversation with your doctor at age 30 for statins, for high-risk people. My question is this: if lowering cholesterol is the answer, why is cardiovascular disease still the #1 cause of death in America? For 4 decades. The drugs do work. They do bring down LDL to a certain level, but the deaths keep increasing. Between 2002 and 2013, statin use in the US nearly doubled. Cholesterol levels fell, but cardiovascular deaths did not fall in the same proportion. But I need to back up and talk about what LDL really is. Is it cholesterol? And the answer is no. LDL is not cholesterol, but LDL stands for low density lipoprotein. It's a protein carrier, but it also carries vitamins. So the body can take those from the liver deep into the cells. Every single cell in your body needs cholesterol. Your brain definitely needs it because your brain's like 60% fat. Cholesterol is also needed to make vitamin D. When you go to the doctor and they order this standard lipid panel, they're going to tell you how much cholesterol is being carried by the LDL trucks. In that standard test, they don't tell you how many trucks there are, and they don't tell you the size of the trucks. There are 2 very different versions of LDL trucks. You have the one LDL, which is the large, buoyant truck. These are the ones that are floating in your bloodstream, and they don't tend to invade the arteries. They don't create a problem because they're buoyant. They float around. They're large. But then we have these small LDL trucks or particles, small dense. These are like little BB pellets. They do tend to trigger inflammation. And when that inflammation happens, that's where the plaquing starts. 2 people can have the exact same LDL number, let's say 160, and have completely different risk factors, depending on whether you have more large buoyant LDL or more small dense particles. But the problem is, to be able to differentiate these 2, you need an advanced lipid profile test, not your standard cholesterol panel, because it's not going to actually give you that data. The big question is, what drives the small dense LDL particles? Well, the answer to that is insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is when you've eaten too much glucose that can come from sugar or starches for way too long, too frequently, And then what happens over time is the cells become resistant. They no longer allow the cell to pull in glucose. So the fuel door gets jammed shut. And then, of course, there's a compensating thing that happens where your body is going to produce a lot of insulin. Too much insulin is what's causing too much of this right here. Now, I just want to temporarily go back to these guidelines again, because there's something you should know. July 2004, the National Cholesterol Education Program issued an update that lowered LDL targets, and they widened who qualified for statins. It pushed millions of Americans into the need for treatment category, okay? Then it came out that 8 out of the 9 authors had filed to disclose financial associations with the makers of cholesterol-lowering drugs. The Center for Science in the Public Interest organized a formal petition asking the NIH to create an independent review panel free of these conflicts of interest so they can actually reevaluate the data behind the update. In 2013, the ACC and the American Heart Association cholesterol guidelines drew the same criticism. 8 out of 15 panelists, including the chair and both co-chairs, had past or current ties to pharmaceutical companies. A study published in the Archives of Internal Medicine looked at 17 ACC and American Heart Association guidelines issued through 2008 across nearly 500 committee members. 56% disclosed conflicts of interest. When you see headlines in the news that say statins will cut your heart attack risk by 36%, if we look behind the curtain, drug companies do clever math tricks to make those statistics sound way more impressive than they really are. I think the best way to explain it is imagine you and a group of friends buying a handful of lottery tickets, okay? Your friend has 2 winning tickets and you have 1 winning ticket, okay? If your friend wanted to brag, they could technically say, I have 100% more winning tickets than you. That's true if you do the comparison, right? 2 is 100% more than 1, right? And this is exactly what the drug company commercials will tell you in their headlines. New drug cuts risk of heart attack by 36%. It sounds like a miracle. What they're actually looking at is they're looking at a massive group of 100 people over several years. And without the drug, maybe 3 people out of those 100 would have a heart attack. And with the drug, over that period of time, the number drops to 2 people. And because 2 is roughly 36% less than 3, they get to print 36% risk reduction. But if they were being completely direct with you, the headline would read, if 100 people take this drug for years, it will protect 1 of them. I have a free download that I want to give to you. This free download is my daily routine in a checklist. This is a routine that I use every day to feel like I'm 18 years old, even though I'm 60 years old, and I want to give it to you for free. And so there's a little link down below. Click it and definitely download that. Next thing I want to do is I want to just show you a comparison of the best case scenario statin drug, of what it can do for your LDL. And then what I want to do is I want to compare and contrast very well studied natural things. And if we look at statins, we look at 45% reduction, okay? If we look at bergamot extract, this is a natural remedy, 15 to 40% reduction, a little less, okay? Then we have berberine, which is a natural remedy, plus red yeast rice, can bring it down to 35%. Then we have berberine by itself, has a potential to bring it down 22%. A low-carb diet has been shown to bring it down by 15%. And then we have intermittent fasting, which is variable because that really depends on what you're eating, when you're eating, and then also what kind of pattern of intermittent fasting you're doing. So in this graph, it tells you there are natural things to lower LDL cholesterol because some people don't want to take statins because they have side effects. As interesting as this is, okay, just to know this, it's still missing the point. What is causing this LDL, especially the small, dense lipoproteins, to go into your arteries and create inflammation and plaquing and giving you a heart attack? And I mentioned this before, I'll say it again, insulin. Insulin. This is why insulin resistance is the biggest primary driver of high LDL. I would highly recommend you also do a fasting insulin test. And then, of course, this brings up the question, what will cause insulin resistance? This is the chronic consumption of carbohydrates in the form of sugar in starches. So a lot of people ask me, what supplements do I recommend? Now, of course, I'm not biased of my own high quality supplement line, but if you go to Amazon and type Dr. Berg supplements, you'll find more information. Now, inflammation is another driver of LDL. Also, make sure if you ever get tested with thyroid, don't just look at the thyroid stimulating hormone. Look at your T3, T4, because the problem could be in the conversion, and it could be a completely different thing. Chronic stress can also drive up LDL. A fatty liver can also drive up LDL. Now you know a lot more about cholesterol. The next most important thing to really wrap your wits about is this insulin resistance. And for that information, you need to watch this video right here. Check it out.